Hey everyone, Nathan from Brandt Workshop here. Today I'm going to be making a custom long charcuterie board using walnut, purple heart, and hard maple. Now before I get started, there's one thing that I do want to bring up, and that is that my awesome goddaughter and godson got me this awesome tape measure, if I can't say awesome enough, that I decided that I'll actually go ahead and use for this project. I think it's pretty cool the fact that one, it's custom made for me, and two, it's something that I could use and think of them while I do some woodworking. So one of the first things I'll start to do is inspect the wood. Check to see how straight it is. Second thing is see if there are any cracks that are running along the wood. And then third, actually just start measuring and figuring out what I'm going to do. And in this case, this wood piece was perfect all the way through. Next thing I'd start doing is inspecting the walnut and doing the exact same thing, checking for squareness, and then also try to get an attack plan on how I'm going to process that lumber. So as you can see here, this is a really wide piece of purple heart, and it's a little bit too long as well, so I decided to go ahead and use my saw to cut it down rather than using my miter saw because it was just a little too wide. Now I know what you're thinking. Why is Nathan wearing gloves and why does he have his hands so close to the blade? Well, first off, my hands are actually not that close to the blade. I just think it's because of the camera angle. I'm at least about 4 or 5 inches away from the blade. Second, the reason why I'm wearing gloves is so I could properly grip the wood. Now, being that it's in its rough state, it makes it a heck of a lot easier for me to get splinters, and if I'm not wearing the gloves, then I'm not going to want to hold the wood properly when I'm processing it. So as you can see here, right now I'm at the joiner and I'm actually flattening one side of the lumber that I can use as a reference point for when I bring it over to the table saw. Next is the purple heart, which I will admit is a bit awkward to run through the joiner. So now what I'm doing is I'm using my table saw to cut the purple heart into smaller, thinner sections. So you can see here it's a little hard to push through. Reason being is the purple heart is warping just ever so slightly as I cut it. Next thing I'm doing is starting to plane all the boards. This is my Grizzly planer that I bought a couple years ago. It's the G0815, and I will have to say, one of the best purchases that I made from my workshop. I truly love this thing, it gets the job done, and honestly, if you are looking for a planer, I would actually highly suggest this one. So here I'm trying to plan out how I'm going to actually come up with the design for the charcuterie board. I'm thinking about making a thin ribbon using hard maple and then having a thicker ribbon of purple heart. And then the main bulk of the charcuterie board being walnut. Oof, I don't know if you heard that pop, but that was my table saw actually breaking on me. One of the plastic gears that's used to raise and lower the blade actually broke. Anyway, so we went ahead and processed the walnut and cut them into smaller strips, and now you can see here I'm actually processing the hard maple that I have. And with hard maple, you got to be very careful. I don't know if you can see that line there already. Hard maple has a tendency to slightly warp when you're cutting it, which could pinch the blade and cause a nasty blowback, and that's how injuries happen. So as you can see here, I'm thinking that this is going to be the design of the charcuterie board. And as you can see, the outer stripes I thought were just a little too thick. So I decided to go ahead and mill them down just a little bit further using my Grizzly planer to get them to, I believe, about a 1/4 inch thick. Then now I'm just taking some measurements and making sure that everything is going according to plan. I ended up using my chop saw or miter station to trim this purple heart down just a little bit more, just so I can start and get a good glue up for it. So overall, I'm happy with the design, so I thought I'd go ahead and just get this charcuterie board ready for glue up by laying down some visqueen that I just bought from Home Depot and some clamps that I've had for quite a while. And before anyone asks, yes, I do love zombies, and I did watch The Walking Dead. So as you can see here, I'm now putting on my rubber gloves, and the reason why is I don't like to get glue on my hands, and when I'm doing glue up, I'll actually just spurt a line of glue on the wood, as you can see here, and then I'll just use my finger. The next thing I do, as I start to clamp up, I'm now putting cawls on both ends of the charcuterie board, and then also one in the middle to make sure that I get a pretty flat board. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but I do need to get it relatively close. So as you can see here, there is no such thing as too many clamps. So after clamping everything up, I called it a day, and I came back the next morning. As you can see, it's the following day. I'm wearing a different shirt. But as you can see, I had some glue that actually got on the cawl, so that's why I'm using kind of like a, I guess you'd call it like a rubber hammer or a rubber mallet. There was a bit of squeeze out from the glue, and so now I'm taking a scraper to remove all that excess dry glue that I had on the board before I run it through my drum sander that I have. Also came from Grizzly as well. And by the way, this video is not sponsored by Grizzly. It's just what I happen to purchase and use. But I will say that I do love their products. Oof, that sound could be so rough sometimes. After scraping all the glue off, I went ahead and ran this board through my drum sander. And the reason why is to prevent a little chip out, not to mention remove as little material as possible as well. So after ensuring that the board was completely flat, I went ahead and moved it over to my Onefinity CNC machine. Now, I realize there are quite a lot of woodworkers out there that don't have a CNC machine, and that's perfectly fine. You could get by just using a router and then creating several jigs in order to carve out the pocket. And in my previous charcuterie board video, I show how I make those jigs. As you can see here, I'm putting a 1/4 inch drill bit on my Onefinity CNC machine, and then I'm in the process now of actually calibrating it. Anytime that you put a different size wood on your CNC machine, or if you switch out the router bit, you're going to want to go ahead and calibrate the Z-axis. And this is to ensure that the CNC knows where the end of the drill bit actually is. Next, I went ahead and insert my USB stick that had the G-code that'd be running on my CNC machine. And with that, I actually created what I needed through a program called VCarve Pro. So once I hit the ready button, as you can see, my CNC machine just starts working, doing its thing, carving away. And after a little while, this is what I had. As you can see, the CNC finally finished up after carving away for about 5 or 6 hours. Now, after taking the wood off the CNC machine, I decided to go ahead and run it through my drum sander a little bit, and the reason why is that I purposely left just a little extra material on the charcuterie board, so when I would carve it away with my CNC machine, it doesn't go and mill into my bed. Now, if you guys are still here, and if you haven't done so already, feel free to like the video and subscribe. Now, after drum sanding the charcuterie board, you now see me sanding the board with 120 grit, and then afterwards switching over to 220 grit. As you can see here, lots of sanding had to be done. Next up, I went ahead and used a V-bit on my router and actually trimmed all along the bottom edge of the charcuterie board just to give it a slight different profile look. I was pretty happy how it turned out. So next thing I started to do was I decided to add some handles on the side, furthering you to be able to easily grip the underside of the charcuterie board if you have a bunch of food that's currently on the platter. So with this, I'm actually using the same V-bit, and I just made it just a little bit deeper in depth, using the pencil marks as reference, as you can see. Afterwards, there was some burn marks left from the router, so I went ahead and used my orbital sander to sand the remaining burn marks off, which worked out pretty well. And as you can see, after finishing the underside, I went ahead and flipped it over to its top side, and I'm now sanding away all the sharp edges. Now, after sanding the board with 120 and then 220, I went ahead and just mist some water on the board just to lift the wood grain. And after it dried, I went ahead and went over it again lightly with 220 to remove all the burrs that stood up from the water. Making sure to get all the sides and ensure that the board is overall very smooth. The next thing I had to do was, of course, burn my Brandt Workshop logo on the back. The next thing that I'm doing is I'm marking where I'm putting the rubber feet for the charcuterie board, and I couldn't find my punch hole tool, so I ended up just using a small screwdriver and then using my drill to actually drill out the screws just to prevent the screw from possibly cracking the wood. One neat little trick is to use blue tape in order to ensure that you're cutting it to the correct depth without going all the way through. Now, if you notice, I'm not screwing the stainless steel screws all the way, and the reason why is because I still have to put the finish on this. If I were to tighten these feet too tight, what will end up happening is that the mineral oil and the beeswax won't seep underneath the rubber feet. Now it's time for my favorite part, which is putting the mineral oil on the charcuterie board. When I'm spreading out the mineral oil, typically what I use is just paper towel. And I wear gloves is just to prevent me from getting mineral all over my hands. After doing the bottom side, I went ahead and flipped it over, and this is why I put the rubber feet on, is that it allows the wood to be separated from the visqueen, and it also helps keep the dirt away. And after finishing the top, you can see here, I actually bought these custom-made steel handles that have been coated, and they came from a blacksmith on Etsy. I thought they looked pretty neat. And as you can see, what I'm doing right now is I'm just measuring and figuring out where exactly these handles need to go. I'm using a screwdriver to mark where I need to put the screw, or actually drill out the screw hole. Now you can see I'm using my drill with the blue tape to now pre-drill the hole for the screws. And this will make it so that the screw has a nice clean entry. Not to mention to also prevent the wood from possibly splitting, being that the screw hole is actually pretty close to the edge of your wood piece. And again, I'm using stainless steel screws. This is to prevent it from possibly rusting, and not to mention it has good strength. And as you can probably hear, this screw was a little difficult to screw in. After screwing both handles in place, I decided to go ahead and remove it, and the reason why is so that I could take some beeswax and apply it on the cutting board. And this is of course after the board has been sitting overnight in mineral oil and it's already been wiped off. So again, you can see me using some rubber gloves, and the reason why, again, is to make it so that I have an easy cleanup. After applying the beeswax, I could just take the gloves off without having to worry about washing my hands and scrubbing all the wax off, which can be a little irritating. Again, I'm using paper towel, and I just simply dip the paper towel in the beeswax that's been heated, and I rub it on the board. Man, look at that logo. As you can see, I also applied beeswax on the underside of the Charcuterie board as well. Now after applying the beeswax, I actually let this sit overnight, and then the following morning I took a paper towel and wiped it down. And this is the result. As you guys can see, the wood definitely darkened, and this is the look that I was looking for. Now I'm just putting in the last screw, and there you go. All done. I'd say it turned out well, but I felt like it was still missing something, so I ended up going back and I made this glider that would house 3 salsa bowls. And to me, I felt like that really completed the charcuterie board. Anyways, if you guys liked my video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, and then also subscribe to my channel. I hope to make some more content soon, and I would really appreciate your help and support. And should you guys have any comments or any questions, definitely let me know. I'll do my best to answer all of them. Until next time, guys, take it easy.